My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm writing this from a hospital bed where the white walls seem to close in on me with each passing hour. 3 days ago, I was a perfectly healthy 28-year-old marketing executive, rushing between meetings and complaining about mundane things like traffic jams and cold coffee. Today, I can barely lift my head without the room spinning violently around me. The doctors have just delivered news that has shattered my world into a million pieces. I have a rare neurological condition called Sussaks syndrome, affecting only 1 in a million people worldwide. The rarity of this diagnosis means that my future has become a terrifying question mark that no medical textbook can answer with certainty. The symptoms started subtly 3 months ago. A slight hearing loss in my left ear that I attributed to too many concerts in college, occasional headaches that I blamed on work stress, and moments of confusion that I dismissed as fatigue from working 60-hour weeks. But when I collapsed in the middle of a client presentation last Tuesday, everything changed in an instant. The emergency room became my second home as doctors ran test after test, searching for answers to explain why my body was betraying me. Each medical professional who entered my room wore the same puzzled expression, consulting textbooks and calling specialists across the country. The uncertainty was maddening. Specialists from Phoenix to Johns Hopkins weighed in on my case, each offering different theories but no definitive answers. The neurologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, sat beside my bed with gentle eyes that couldn't hide the gravity of her words. She explained how my immune system was attacking the small blood vessels in my brain, retina, and inner ear, creating a perfect storm of devastating symptoms that could affect my hearing, vision, and cognitive function permanently. The medical terminology felt foreign and frightening as she described microinfarcts, encephalopathy, and retinal artery occlusions. Some patients recovered completely within months, she explained, while others faced permanent disabilities that would forever alter their quality of life. The statistics were sobering. Roughly 30% of patients experienced significant long-term complications, while others seemed to respond well to aggressive treatment protocols that hadn't even existed a decade ago. As I lay here now, feeling the weight of this diagnosis pressing down on my chest like a lead blanket, memories of my life begin flooding back like scenes from a movie playing in slow motion. The irony isn't lost on me. Just when my future has become so uncertain, my past has never seemed clearer or more precious. Every moment, every decision, every person who shaped me suddenly feels monumentally significant in ways I never recognized before. I find myself wondering if this is how all stories end, with a desperate attempt to make sense of the journey that brought us to this point. The nurses tell me that stress can worsen my symptoms, but how does one avoid stress when facing the possibility that life as you know it might be ending? My family surrounds me now, their faces etched with worry, determination, and a forced optimism that breaks my heart. My mother holds my hand with the same gentle strength she used when I was a child afraid of thunderstorms, while my father paces the room like a caged animal, unable to sit still in his overwhelming anxiety. My younger brother, Jake, tries to lighten the mood with terrible jokes and stories from his college classes, but his eyes betray the fear that we're all trying desperately to suppress. They don't know what I know, that the doctors have privately told me this might be the beginning of the end, or perhaps, if I'm incredibly lucky, just another chapter in a story that's far from over. The weight of their love and hope feels both comforting and crushing, knowing how much they'll suffer if I don't recover completely. The machines around me beep rhythmically, monitoring every vital sign while 4 medications drip slowly into my bloodstream, each drop carrying the possibility of healing or merely delaying the inevitable. I close my eyes and let my mind drift backward through time like pages in a photo album. If these are to be my final days of clarity, then I want to remember everything. The laughter that made my sides ache, the tears that seemed endless, the mistakes that taught me wisdom, and the triumphs that filled me with pride. I want to trace the path that led me here, to this moment where life hangs in the balance between recovery and catastrophe. My story begins not with this diagnosis that threatens to define me, but 28 years ago in a small apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, where a little girl with impossibly big dreams first opened her eyes to a world full of infinite possibilities. Dr. Chen returns with my latest test results, her expression unreadable as she reviews the numbers that will determine my treatment plan. The next few weeks will be critical, she explains, as we begin an aggressive regimen of immunosuppressive therapy that carries its own risks and side effects. Success is measured not just in survival, but in how much of my former self I'll be able to reclaim once this storm passes. The uncertainty is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of all, not knowing whether I'll emerge from this battle as the same person who entered it. But as I prepare to fight for my life, I'm determined to honor the journey that brought me to this moment by remembering every step along the way. The afternoon sun streams through my hospital window, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor as visiting hours approach. Soon, This room will fill with the voices of people who love me, each carrying their own fears and hopes for my recovery. But right now, in this quiet moment before the chaos of treatments and tests resume, I want to travel back to the beginning. I want to remember the little girl who learned to ride a bicycle in a parking lot, who dreamed of conquering the world one small victory at a time. That girl's story deserves to be told, regardless of how this current chapter ends. She deserves to be remembered not as a victim of a rare disease, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The 4-pump beeps softly as another dose of medication enters my system, carrying with it both hope and uncertainty. My reflection in the darkened window shows a face I barely recognize, pale, drawn, marked by the stress of these past few days. But behind the exhaustion, I can still see traces of the determined child who refused to give up when learning to ride that bicycle, the teenager who overcame every obstacle placed in her path, the young woman who built a career through sheer force of will. That same spirit will carry me through whatever comes next. My story is far from over, and I refuse to let it end before I've had the chance to tell it properly. The gentle hum of medical equipment provides a constant soundtrack to my thoughts as I prepare to embark on this journey through memory. Each beep, each mechanical breath of the machines reminds me that I'm still here, still fighting, still capable of hope even in the darkest moments. The neurologist mentioned that stress and emotional turmoil could potentially worsen my symptoms, but she also emphasized that maintaining a positive outlook and strong support system could significantly impact my recovery. Perhaps remembering the joy, love, and triumph that filled my life before this diagnosis will provide the strength I need to overcome whatever challenges lie ahead. My past isn't just a collection of memories, it's the foundation upon which my recovery will be built. The digital clock on the wall reads 3:47 p.m., marking another moment in what has become a completely altered existence where time is measured not in appointments and deadlines, but in test results and medication schedules. Outside my window, I can see people walking purposefully along the sidewalk, living their normal lives without any awareness of the battles being fought within these hospital walls. Just days ago, I was one of them, blissfully unaware of how quickly everything could change. Now I'm fighting for the chance to return to that world of mundane concerns and everyday miracles. The journey back to normal, if such a thing is even possible, begins with remembering who I was before this disease tried to redefine me. My laptop sits open on the bedside table, cursor blinking expectantly as I prepare to document this experience. The doctors encouraged me to keep a journal during treatment, claiming that writing could provide therapeutic benefits beyond mere documentation. They spoke of patients who found healing not just in medicine, but in the process of making meaning from their suffering. Whether I'm recording my final thoughts or the beginning of a recovery story remains to be seen. But either way, this narrative deserves to be preserved, not just for my own understanding, but for anyone else who might face similar battles. My story begins not here in this sterile room, but in the warmth of a small apartment where love was abundant even when money was scarce. The weight of everything, the diagnosis, the uncertain prognosis, the aggressive treatment plan that lies ahead threatens to overwhelm me completely. But I refuse to let fear write the ending to my story. 28 years of living have taught me that resilience isn't about avoiding difficulties, but about finding the strength to face them head-on. Every challenge I've overcome, every person I've loved, every dream I've pursued has prepared me for this moment. The little girl who learned to ride a bicycle despite countless falls, the teenager who refused to let others define her limitations, the young woman who built a career through determination and hard work. She's still here, still fighting, still believing that tomorrow can be better than today.
We tell emotional and inspiring stories about life's toughest battles, moments of illness, struggle, recovery, love, and loss. Not every story has a happy ending, but each one carries a powerful message of strength, hope, and humanity. Subscribe to discover moving stories that touch the heart and stay with you forever.
I was born during a monsoon storm that knocked out power across half of Phoenix, and my mother always said it was a prophetic sign that I would bring both chaos and electricity into their carefully ordered lives. The emergency generators at the hospital flickered on just as I made my dramatic entrance into the world, screaming with the fury of someone who had been rudely awakened from comfortable dreams. My parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, were young immigrants from Guadalajara who had arrived in Arizona with nothing but suitcases full of hopes and determination to build something better for the children they dreamed of having. Our tiny two-bedroom apartment smelled perpetually of my grandmother's homemade tamales and echoed with the sounds of Spanish lullabies that wrapped around me like warm blankets woven from centuries of tradition. Those early years were filled with a richness that had absolutely nothing to do with material wealth, and everything to do with the boundless love that flowed through our small home like electricity through copper wires. My first coherent memory is of my father teaching me to ride a bicycle in the cracked asphalt parking lot behind our apartment building, where desert weeds pushed through concrete and the summer heat made the air shimmer like water. I was 4 years old, pigtails flying behind me, determined to master this two-wheeled contraption that seemed impossibly large and intimidating for someone whose feet could barely reach the pedals. He ran beside me for what felt like hours, his strong carpenter's hands steadying me whenever I wobbled precariously toward disaster, his encouraging voice in rapid-fire Spanish drowning out the fears that threatened to paralyze me completely. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as sweat poured down both our faces, but neither of us was willing to give up on this milestone that represented so much more than simple transportation. The moment he finally let go and I realized I was riding completely alone, pure joy exploded in my chest like fireworks on New Year's Eve. I had conquered something that seemed utterly impossible just hours before, and that feeling of triumphant accomplishment would chase me throughout my entire childhood, pushing me to attempt increasingly ambitious challenges. School became simultaneously my sanctuary and my battlefield, a place where I could excel academically while also learning harsh lessons about belonging and acceptance in American society. I was naturally gifted with languages, speaking Spanish at home and English everywhere else, switching between them as easily as changing clothes depending on the social situation. My teachers praised my quick mind and insatiable curiosity about everything from ancient Egyptian history to basic principles of physics, but being one of only 3 Mexican-American students in my predominantly white elementary school came with social challenges I was far too young to fully understand or process effectively. Some classmates questioned whether I truly belonged in their world, whether my slight accent was too pronounced, whether the aromatic lunches my mother packed with such love smelled too exotic for their delicate sensibilities. These experiences planted seeds of fierce determination deep in my young heart. I would prove beyond any shadow of doubt that I belonged everywhere I wanted to be, and I would never let anyone else's narrow perspective limit my potential or define my worth. My younger brother Jake entered this world when I was 6 years old, and suddenly I wasn't the undisputed center of my parents' universe anymore. Initially, jealousy consumed me like a green monster as I watched this tiny, wrinkled intruder command all the attention I had previously enjoyed exclusively for myself. He cried constantly, disrupted everyone's sleep, and somehow managed to monopolize every adult conversation with his mere existence, leaving me feeling forgotten and displaced in my own family. But the first time he wrapped his impossibly small, perfect fingers around mine and looked directly at me with those enormous brown eyes, full of complete trust and unconditional love, my heart melted entirely like ice cream left too long in the Arizona sun. From that transformative moment forward, I became his fiercest protector and his biggest champion, a role that would define much of my childhood identity and teach me valuable lessons about responsibility, sacrifice, and the profound satisfaction that comes from putting someone else's needs before your own desires. Our family faced its first major financial crisis when I was 8 years old, and my father was unexpectedly laid off from his construction job just 3 weeks before Christmas, plunging our household into uncertainty and stress. The weight of unemployment hung over our small apartment like a suffocating dark cloud that seemed to press down on all of us with invisible but crushing force. I watched my parents have hushed, worried conversations late into the night when they thought Jake and I were safely asleep, saw my mother's eyes red and swollen from crying when she thought we weren't looking, felt the tension that crept into every family interaction like poison spreading through our previously happy home. But instead of breaking us apart or crushing our spirits permanently, this unexpected challenge brought us closer together in ways I couldn't have imagined possible. We learned to find genuine joy in simple pleasures, board games instead of expensive electronic toys, homemade gifts crafted with love instead of store-bought presents, family movie nights with popcorn popped on our ancient stove instead of trips to the expensive theater downtown. The profound resilience I witnessed in my parents during those difficult 6 months became the unshakable foundation of my own inner strength and determination to overcome obstacles. They never complained bitterly about their circumstances, never blamed external forces or other people for their temporary struggles, never allowed despair to take permanent residence in our home despite the very real financial pressures they faced daily. Instead, they worked even harder than before, took on odd jobs and side projects, loved us even more deeply and intentionally, and taught Jake and me through their example that obstacles were simply temporary detours on the longer road to achieving our dreams, not permanent roadblocks that should stop us from moving forward. My father found steady employment again after 6 months of searching, but by that time I had learned invaluable lessons about perseverance, gratitude, and the importance of maintaining hope even when circumstances seem overwhelming. These early experiences with adversity shaped my fundamental understanding that true wealth came not from the material possessions we accumulated, but from the unbreakable bonds we built with each other and the strength of character we developed through facing challenges together as a united family. Our small apartment became a hub of cultural celebration where Mexican traditions blended seamlessly with American customs, creating a unique hybrid identity that would influence how I saw myself and my place in the world for years to come. My grandmother, Abuela Rosa, visited every Sunday after church, bringing with her the most incredible homemade tortillas and stories from her childhood in rural Mexico that transported us to a different time and place entirely. She spoke only Spanish, forcing me to maintain fluency in my parents' native language, even as English became my primary mode of communication with the outside world. Her weathered hands moved constantly as she cooked, kneaded dough, or gestured dramatically while recounting family legends that seemed to grow more elaborate with each telling. These weekly visits grounded me in history and tradition, while also teaching me that identity could be complex and multifaceted without being confusing or contradictory. I learned to code switch effortlessly between cultures, drawing strength from my heritage while also embracing the opportunities available in my American birthplace. The neighborhood where we lived was a fascinating mixture of working-class families from various backgrounds, each struggling to achieve their own version of the American dream through hard work and determination. Mrs. Johnson, our African-American neighbor, worked as a night shift nurse and often brought us homemade cookies when she returned from her shifts at the county hospital. The Patel family from India owned a small convenience store downtown and frequently gave us discounts on groceries when money was particularly tight. These relationships taught me early that poverty and struggle were universal human experiences that transcended racial and ethnic boundaries, and that kindness and community support could make even the most difficult circumstances bearable. Our diverse neighborhood became my first classroom in understanding how different people could share common goals and values despite surface differences in language, culture, or appearance. Summer vacations were spent not at expensive resorts or theme parks, but in creative adventures that stretched our imaginations and strengthened our family bonds without straining the household budget. We transformed our small living room into elaborate pillow forts, organized neighborhood talent shows in our apartment complex's courtyard, and took long walks through the desert to collect interesting rocks and observe wildlife that most people never noticed in their rush through daily life. My parents possessed an incredible gift for making ordinary experiences feel magical and special through their enthusiasm and creativity. These summers taught me that happiness didn't require expensive entertainment or exotic locations. It simply required present moment awareness, imagination, and the willingness to find wonder in everyday experiences that surrounded us constantly. My relationship with education deepened significantly during these formative years as I discovered the transformative power of reading and learning to unlock doors that had previously seemed permanently closed to someone from my background. The local library became my second home, where I devoured books about far-off places, historical figures who overcame tremendous obstacles, and scientific discoveries that expanded my understanding of how the world worked in ways both visible and invisible. Mrs. Martinez, the head librarian who shared my surname but no family connection, took special interest in nurturing my love of learning by recommending increasingly challenging books and encouraging me to participate in summer reading programs that pushed my intellectual boundaries. These experiences taught me that knowledge was the one thing that nobody could ever take away from me, regardless of what other challenges I might face in life. The elementary school years concluded with a profound sense of accomplishment as I graduated at the top of my class, earned recognition for perfect attendance, and received awards for academic excellence that made my parents burst with pride during the ceremony. But more importantly, I had developed a strong sense of self-worth that wasn't dependent on external validation or comparison to others. I knew who I was, where I came from, and what values would guide my decisions as I faced the more complex challenges that awaited me in the years ahead. The foundation my family had built through love, sacrifice, and unwavering support would prove essential as I navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence and beyond. These early years had taught me that strength comes not from avoiding difficulties, but from learning how to face them with courage, creativity, and the support of people who believe in your potential, even when you struggle to believe in it yourself. High school arrived with all the complexity and confusion that adolescence brings, but for me, it also represented new opportunities to discover who I was beyond my family's protective influence and cultural expectations. At 14, I was tall for my age, awkward in my rapidly changing body, and desperately trying to navigate the intricate social hierarchies that seemed to shift daily like sand dunes in the desert wind. My grades remained excellent, consistently placing me in the top 5% of my class, but I struggled with the typical teenage desire to fit in seamlessly, while also honoring the deeply ingrained values my parents had spent years instilling in me. The cultural divide between my home life and school environment sometimes felt like standing on a precarious bridge between two completely different worlds, never quite belonging fully to either side, but somehow finding ways to draw strength from both. The pressure to assimilate competed constantly with my desire to maintain the cultural identity that made me unique, creating an internal tension that would take years to resolve satisfactorily. My freshman year brought the devastating realization that academic excellence, while personally satisfying, didn't automatically translate into social acceptance among my peers. I watched popular students who struggled academically receive invitations to parties and social events that I desperately wanted to attend, while my high test scores seemed to mark me as different rather than accomplished. The cafeteria became a daily reminder of social stratification, where students self-segregated into clearly defined groups based on economics, ethnicity, interests, and social status. I found myself caught between multiple worlds, too Mexican for some groups, not Mexican enough for others, too studious for the popular crowd, too focused on fitting in for the academic achievers. This period of social confusion taught me valuable lessons about authenticity and the futility of trying to be someone you're not just to gain acceptance from people whose approval ultimately doesn't matter in the long run. My sophomore year brought my first taste of real heartbreak when Danny Morrison, the charming boy I'd been secretly crushing on since the beginning of freshman year, finally asked me to the winter formal dance. I spent weeks fantasizing about that magical evening, imagining how perfect everything would be as we danced together under twinkling lights while romantic music played in the background. I saved money from my part-time job at a local grocery store to buy a dress that made me feel beautiful and confident, spent hours practicing dance moves in my bedroom mirror, and built up expectations that no real event could possibly meet. But when Danny picked me up in his father's expensive car on the night of the dance, I quickly realized he had been drinking heavily with his friends beforehand as part of their pre-dance festivities. The evening dissolved into a nightmare of embarrassment and disappointment as he stumbled through our dances, made inappropriate comments that left me feeling uncomfortable and objectified, and eventually abandoned me completely to rejoin his intoxicated friends for more drinking in the parking lot. The aftermath of that disastrous dance taught me important lessons about self-respect, the difference between infatuation and genuine care, and the danger of placing someone on a pedestal based on superficial attraction rather than character assessment. I spent days analyzing every detail of that evening, wondering what I had done wrong and how I could have prevented such a humiliating experience. Eventually, I realized that Danny's behavior reflected his own immaturity and poor decision-making rather than any deficiency on my part. This painful but necessary lesson helped me develop better judgment about relationships and taught me to value people based on how they treated others rather than how popular or attractive they appeared to be. The experience also strengthened my resolve to maintain high standards for how I expected to be treated by anyone who wanted to be part of my life. Junior year marked a significant turning point when Mrs. Rodriguez, my passionate English teacher, recognized something special in my writing that I hadn't fully seen or appreciated myself. She encouraged me to enter a competitive statewide essay competition about overcoming adversity, pushing me to dig deep and write honestly about my experiences as a first-generation Mexican-American student navigating between cultures while pursuing academic excellence. To my complete amazement and overwhelming joy, I won first place among hundreds of entries from across Arizona, earning not just recognition but also a substantial scholarship to attend a prestigious summer program at Arizona State University. That summer program became my first real taste of college life and opened my eyes to possibilities I had never seriously considered before: journalism, creative writing, marketing, communications, public relations, and countless other career paths that could utilize my natural abilities with language and communication. However, success came with its own unexpected challenges and complications that I hadn't anticipated during my years of struggling for recognition. Some classmates accused me of receiving special treatment or unfair advantages because of my ethnicity, suggesting that diversity initiatives, rather than merit, had led to my achievements. Others seemed genuinely surprised that someone like me could excel academically, revealing unconscious biases that stung more deeply than overt discrimination might have. These comments planted persistent seeds of imposter syndrome that would follow me for years, making me question whether my accomplishments were truly earned through hard work and ability, or simply the result of well-intentioned policies designed to level an uneven playing field. The doubt was toxic and insidious, eating away at my confidence even as my achievements continued to mount and outside recognition validated my capabilities repeatedly. My relationship with Jake became increasingly complicated during these tumultuous years as he entered middle school and began his own journey of identity formation and independence assertion. The little boy who had once looked up to me with unconditional admiration and hero worship was now a moody 13-year-old who seemed embarrassed by our family's traditions and eager to blend seamlessly into mainstream American culture without the complications of ethnic identity. We fought constantly about everything from his declining grades to his choice of friends who seemed to influence him toward behaviors that worried me deeply. I felt like I was helplessly watching my beloved little brother slip away from the values and connections that had anchored our family through difficult times. Our arguments often centered on his rejection of Spanish language at home, his reluctance to participate in cultural celebrations, and his apparent desire to distance himself from anything that marked him as different from his predominantly white peer group. The summer before my senior year, our family faced another devastating crisis when my beloved grandmother, Abuela Rosa, passed away unexpectedly from a massive heart attack while preparing Sunday dinner for our weekly family gathering. She had been the keeper of our family stories, the living repository of traditions, recipes, customs, and memories that connected us to our Mexican heritage and reminded us of where we came from even as we pursued American dreams. Her funeral was the first time I truly understood the profound weight of loss, the way grief could hollow out your chest and make simple breathing feel like exhausting physical labor. The church was packed with people whose lives she had touched through her kindness, generosity, and unwavering faith, making me realize how much impact one person could have on an entire community through small daily acts of love and service. But in the months that followed Abuela Rosa's death, something beautiful and unexpected emerged from our collective mourning process. Our family grew closer and more intentional about preserving the memories, traditions, and values that my grandmother had treasured throughout her long and meaningful life. My mother began teaching me the secret family recipes that had been passed down through generations of women, while my father shared stories about his childhood in Mexico that I had never heard before. Even Jake seemed to recognize that something irreplaceable had been lost and began showing more interest in learning about our cultural heritage. I started to understand that honoring our past didn't limit our future possibilities. Instead, it enriched them by providing a foundation of identity and values that could support us through any challenges we might face. This realization would prove crucial as I prepared to leave home for college and face the wider world with confidence rooted in knowing exactly who I was and where I came from. The final months of high school were filled with college applications, scholarship essays, and the bittersweet process of preparing to leave everything familiar behind for unknown adventures ahead. I had been accepted to several universities with generous financial aid packages, but Arizona State University felt like the right choice because it offered excellent programs while allowing me to stay close enough to support my family when needed. The scholarship money I had earned through academic achievement and essay competitions would cover most of my expenses, making higher education financially feasible for a family that had always struggled to make ends meet. As graduation day approached, I felt simultaneously excited about the independence and opportunities that awaited me and terrified about leaving the safety and support of my family's love. The teenager who had started high school uncertain about her place in the world was graduating with a strong sense of identity, clear goals for the future, and unshakable confidence in her ability to succeed despite any obstacles that might arise. Arizona State University felt like stepping into a completely different universe where I was finally free to reinvent myself without the weight of everyone's preconceived notions or the limiting expectations that had followed me throughout high school. The sprawling campus with its palm trees, modern buildings, and diverse student population of over 50,000 people represented possibilities I had only dreamed about during my teenage years in our small neighborhood. My dorm room in Barrett Honors College became my personal sanctuary, carefully decorated with photographs of my family, inspirational quotes written in both English and Spanish, and colorful artwork that reminded me daily of my goals, dreams, and the long journey that had brought me to this moment. My assigned roommate, Sarah, was a blonde girl from affluent Scottsdale whose life experiences were so dramatically different from mine that we might as well have grown up on entirely different planets orbiting separate solar systems. Yet somehow, despite our vastly different backgrounds, we developed an unlikely but genuine friendship that taught me invaluable lessons about looking beyond surface differences to find the common ground that connects all human beings regardless of their circumstances. My chosen major in communications with a specialized focus on marketing felt like the perfect blend of creativity and analytical strategy, allowing me to explore how carefully crafted messages could influence human behavior while also creating meaningful connections between people and the brands or causes they supported. Professor Williams, a distinguished former advertising executive who had worked for major agencies in New York and Los Angeles before transitioning to academic life, became my mentor and intellectual guide, pushing me to think critically about the ethical implications of persuasion in an increasingly connected but polarized world. His courses were intellectually demanding, requiring us to analyze successful marketing campaigns while also considering their broader social impact, cultural sensitivity, and long-term effects on consumer behavior and societal values. These stimulating discussions shaped my evolving understanding of how powerful communication could be when used responsibly, and how important it was for marketing professionals to consider the moral dimensions of their work, rather than focusing solely on profit maximization and client satisfaction. The remarkable campus diversity opened my eyes to perspectives, cultures, and worldviews I had never encountered before in my relatively sheltered Arizona upbringing. My friend Ahmad, a brilliant pre-med student from Lebanon whose family had immigrated to escape civil war, taught me about Middle Eastern history, Islamic traditions, and the complex political dynamics that shaped his homeland, while I shared stories of my Mexican heritage, family struggles, and the immigrant experience in America. Jessica, a talented art major from rural Montana whose family raised cattle on thousands of acres of rangeland, showed me that small-town America had its own rich traditions, unique challenges, and deeply held values that were often misunderstood or oversimplified by people from urban areas. These meaningful friendships expanded my worldview exponentially and helped me realize that everyone carries invisible struggles, hidden strengths, and complex stories that can't be understood through superficial interactions or assumptions based on appearance, accent, or background. My first serious romantic relationship began during the spring semester of my sophomore year with Marcus, a charismatic psychology major who possessed an infectious laugh, unwavering optimism that balanced my sometimes anxious nature, and intellectual curiosity that matched my own. He came from a solidly middle-class African-American family in Tucson and understood intimately the complexities of navigating predominantly white institutions while maintaining strong connections to cultural roots and community expectations. Our relationship felt refreshingly mature and supportive from the beginning, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared academic ambitions, and genuine appreciation for each other's perspectives and experiences. For the first time in my life, I experienced romantic love that felt stable and nurturing rather than dramatic and emotionally exhausting, teaching me what healthy partnership could look like when both people were committed to supporting each other's growth and success. Junior year brought new challenges and opportunities when I was selected through a highly competitive process for a prestigious internship at Phoenix's largest marketing firm, where I would work alongside seasoned professionals while earning academic credit and valuable real-world experience. The sleek downtown office environment initially intimidated me. Everyone seemed impossibly polished, confident, and sophisticated, while I felt like a child playing dress-up in borrowed business attire that never quite fit properly. My supervisor, Ms. Chen, was a demanding perfectionist who had built her reputation on producing exceptional work under impossible deadlines and who accepted nothing less than absolute excellence from everyone on her team. At first, her sharp criticism and exacting standards crushed my confidence and made me question whether I belonged in such a high-pressure professional environment. But gradually I learned to interpret her feedback as an investment in my growth, rather than personal attacks on my abilities or character. The delicate balance between work responsibilities, academic demands, and relationship maintenance became increasingly difficult to manage as graduation approached and real-world pressures intensified. Marcus and I began having serious, sometimes difficult conversations about our future together, but our respective career goals seemed to be pulling us in completely different geographical directions. He had been accepted into several PhD programs in psychology, which would require at least 5 more years of intensive study and research, while I was eager to launch my marketing career immediately after graduation and begin building the professional reputation I had been working toward throughout college. The growing tension between love and ambition created stress that neither of us knew how to handle with the emotional maturity that such complex decisions required. We both recognized intellectually that our relationship might not survive the transition from college to the demanding adult world, but neither of us was emotionally ready to face that painful possibility directly or make the difficult decisions that might be necessary for both of us to achieve our individual dreams. The internship experience proved transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated when I first applied for the competitive position. Working on real campaigns for actual clients taught me that success in business required not just creativity, intelligence, and technical skills, but also political awareness, emotional intelligence, and the ability to manage difficult personalities while maintaining professional relationships. My first major client assignment involved developing a comprehensive marketing strategy for a local restaurant chain whose owner, Mr. Thompson, had strong opinions about everything related to his business and very little patience for what he dismissively called marketing nonsense or corporate buzzwords. Building his trust and respect required months of careful relationship building, consistently exceeding his expectations, and proving through measurable results that strategic marketing could significantly impact his bottom line. When our carefully crafted campaign resulted in a 23% increase in his quarterly sales, the satisfaction and sense of accomplishment felt even better than any grade I had ever received in school. By the time my senior year arrived, I had developed a clearer sense of my professional identity and personal values, but I also faced the daunting prospect of making life-changing decisions about career, relationships, and geographical location. The marketing firm where I had interned offered me a full-time position with competitive salary and benefits, but I also received attractive job offers from companies in other cities that would require leaving Arizona and the support system I had built over 4 years of college life. Marcus and I continued to struggle with the geographic and temporal mismatch between our career timelines, leading to increasingly frequent arguments and periods of emotional distance that signaled the approaching end of our relationship despite our genuine care for each other. The stress of these major life decisions, combined with the pressure of maintaining high academic performance while working part-time, began taking a noticeable toll on my physical health, sleep patterns, and overall well-being. The final semester of college was simultaneously exciting and melancholy as I prepared to leave the protected environment where I had grown so much intellectually, emotionally, and socially. Graduation day approached with a mixture of pride, anxiety, and anticipation that left me feeling simultaneously accomplished and completely unprepared for the full responsibilities of adult life. The ceremony itself was a celebration of everything I had achieved academically, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with unknowns, challenges, and opportunities that would test everything I had learned during my 4 transformative years on campus. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about my parents sitting proudly in the audience, the first person in our family to earn a college degree, and I felt the weight of their sacrifices, hopes, and dreams that had made this moment possible. The college years had taught me not just academic concepts and professional skills, but also valuable lessons about independence, resilience, and the importance of staying true to my values even when facing pressure to compromise or take easier paths. Graduation day arrived with a complex mixture of overwhelming pride and paralyzing terror that left me feeling simultaneously accomplished and completely unprepared for the full responsibilities of independent adult life in the professional world. My parents beamed with joy and unconcealed pride as I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, representing not just my personal achievement but the culmination of their decades of sacrifice, hard work, and unwavering belief in the American dream. The marketing firm where I had completed my transformative internship offered me a full-time position as assistant account manager with a starting salary that seemed impossibly generous to someone who had grown up watching parents struggle to pay bills, and suddenly I was thrust into the professional world with business cards bearing my name, client meetings that determined million-dollar campaigns, and responsibilities that felt overwhelmingly important and simultaneously thrilling. My first apartment was a modest 1-bedroom unit in Tempe that I shared with occasional cockroaches, a constantly dripping kitchen faucet, and neighbors whose late-night parties reminded me that I was no longer living in the structured environment of college dormitories. Despite its imperfections, this small space represented freedom and independence in ways that made every inconvenience feel worthwhile and meaningful. I furnished it slowly with hand-me-downs from my family, clearance items from discount stores, and a few carefully chosen pieces that reflected my personal style and growing sense of adult identity. The silence of living completely alone took considerable adjustment after years of roommates, family chaos, and the constant background noise of campus life. But I gradually learned to appreciate the solitude as an invaluable opportunity for reflection, personal growth, and the development of my own daily routines and habits. The apartment became my sanctuary where I could decompress from work stress, practice presentations for important client meetings, and slowly build the life I had been dreaming about since high school. Marcus and I attempted valiantly to maintain our relationship despite the increasing geographical distance and the fundamental differences in our chosen career paths. He had moved to California to begin his doctoral program in psychology, while I remained in Arizona to build my marketing career from the ground up. Our nightly phone calls became increasingly strained and difficult as we struggled to bridge the growing gap between our diverging daily experiences, priorities, and future goals. He was immersed in academic research about cognitive behavioral therapy and statistical analysis, while I was learning to navigate complex office politics, demanding client expectations, and the fast-paced world of commercial marketing campaigns. The differences in our daily realities made it progressively harder to connect emotionally, share meaningful experiences, or maintain the intimate bond that had sustained us throughout college. Eventually, after months of trying to force a relationship that was clearly evolving in incompatible directions, we both acknowledged with mutual sadness that we had grown into different people with fundamentally incompatible life paths and futures. Work became my primary refuge, and my most intensive education in skills that college had never adequately prepared me to handle in real-world professional situations. I learned through trial and error that success in business required not just creativity, intelligence, and technical marketing knowledge, but also sophisticated political awareness, emotional intelligence, and the delicate ability to manage difficult personalities while maintaining productive professional relationships that could withstand conflicts and disagreements. My first major independent client was a local restaurant chain whose owner, Mr. Thompson, had built his business through decades of hard work but had strong, inflexible opinions about every aspect of marketing and very little patience for what he dismissively called corporate marketing nonsense or fancy advertising theories. Building his trust and earning his respect required months of careful relationship building, consistently exceeding his demanding expectations, and proving through measurable, concrete results that strategic marketing investment could significantly impact his bottom line and long-term business success. When our carefully developed and meticulously executed campaign resulted in a remarkable 28% increase in his quarterly revenue, the deep satisfaction and sense of professional accomplishment felt even more rewarding than any academic achievement from my college years. My social life during these foundational early career years revolved primarily around work-related events, industry conferences, and professional networking opportunities that felt simultaneously exciting and emotionally exhausting. I joined the local chapter of Women in Marketing and began regularly attending industry conferences where I met successful professionals who inspired me with their achievements, shared valuable insights about career development, and provided glimpses into the possibilities that awaited me if I continued working diligently toward my goals. However, I also encountered subtle but persistent forms of discrimination that served as harsh reminders that breaking through traditional barriers required constant vigilance, exceptional performance, and the emotional resilience to handle unfair treatment with grace and professionalism. Some clients seemed genuinely surprised when I walked confidently into meetings as the lead strategist, apparently expecting someone who looked different, sounded different, or fit their preconceived notions about what successful marketing professionals should be. These experiences were frustrating and demoralizing, but they also strengthened my determination to excel so thoroughly that my competence could never be questioned or dismissed. The relentless stress of proving myself professionally while simultaneously managing complete financial independence began taking a noticeable toll on my physical health, emotional well-being, and personal relationships outside of work. I developed chronic headaches that I initially attributed to long hours staring at computer screens and the blue light from digital devices, but which persisted even when I took breaks from technology and tried various remedies recommended by colleagues and internet research. My sleep patterns became increasingly irregular as work deadlines conflicted with my body's natural rhythms, and I found myself relying more heavily on caffeine to maintain the energy levels required for peak performance during important client presentations and strategic planning sessions. Most concerning, I noticed that I was becoming progressively isolated from friends and family members who had been essential parts of my support system during college and earlier periods of my life. Jake, now a high school junior preparing for college applications and dealing with typical teenage pressures, would call occasionally to update me on his academic progress, social life, and the various challenges he was navigating, but our conversations felt increasingly forced and superficial rather than genuinely connected. I found myself offering generic advice about studying hard and making good choices rather than engaging deeply with the specific issues he was facing or providing the kind of meaningful guidance that an older sister should offer. My parents worried constantly that I was working too many hours, not taking proper care of my health, and prioritizing career advancement over personal happiness and family relationships that had always been central to our cultural values. When they expressed these concerns during Sunday family dinners, I dismissed their worries as generational differences or cultural attitudes that didn't apply to my professional situation, not recognizing how prophetic and insightful their observations would eventually prove to be. The second year of my career brought increased responsibilities, a modest salary increase, and recognition from senior management that validated my hard work and professional growth. I was promoted to account manager and given primary responsibility for 3 major clients whose combined annual marketing budgets exceeded $2 million, representing both an incredible opportunity and enormous pressure to perform at levels that could significantly impact the firm's reputation and profitability. The promotion came with a corner office, direct reports who looked to me for leadership and strategic direction, and inclusion in high-level planning meetings where company executives made decisions that affected dozens of employees and millions of dollars in client investments. Success at this level required not just individual excellence, but also the ability to inspire and manage team members, coordinate complex multi-departmental projects, and maintain client relationships that could be terminated at any moment if expectations weren't consistently exceeded. The demanding schedule of client meetings, strategic planning sessions, creative brainstorming, and deadline management left little time for personal interests, romantic relationships, or the kind of self-care that I now realize was essential for long-term success and happiness. I convinced myself that these sacrifices were temporary necessities on the path to achieving my career goals, not understanding that the patterns I was establishing would become increasingly difficult to change as responsibilities and expectations continued to escalate. Weekends became extensions of the work week as I caught up on project planning, prepared presentations for Monday morning meetings, and responded to client emails that couldn't wait until business hours. The line between my professional identity and personal self began to blur as work consumed more and more of my mental and emotional energy, leaving less space for the relationships, hobbies, and simple pleasures that had once brought balance and joy to my life. By the end of my second year in the marketing industry, I had achieved many of the professional goals I had set during college, but I was also beginning to recognize that success came with costs that I hadn't fully anticipated or prepared for during my academic preparation. The chronic stress of high-pressure deadlines, difficult client relationships, and constant performance evaluation was affecting my health in ways that went beyond occasional headaches and irregular sleep patterns. I experienced frequent stomach problems that I attributed to too much coffee and irregular meal timing, persistent muscle tension in my neck and shoulders that made relaxation difficult even during rare downtime, and a general sense of anxiety that seemed to follow me everywhere regardless of immediate circumstances. Most troubling, I noticed that I was losing touch with the sense of purpose and meaning that had originally drawn me to marketing as a field where creativity and strategy could combine to solve real problems for businesses and their customers. Despite these growing concerns about work-life balance and personal well-being, I continued pushing forward with the same determination that had carried me through college and early career challenges. I told myself that these difficulties were normal parts of professional development, and that successful people in every field had to make similar sacrifices to achieve their goals. The alternative, slowing down, setting boundaries, or prioritizing personal needs over professional advancement, felt like giving up on dreams that my family had supported through years of sacrifice and investment. I didn't yet understand that sustainable success required not just talent and hard work, but also wisdom about when to push forward and when to pause for rest, reflection, and renewal. The lessons I was about to learn about the interconnection between physical health, emotional well-being, and professional performance would come at a cost that no career achievement could justify, but they would also provide insights that would transform my understanding of what it truly means to live a successful and meaningful life. At 25, just as I was hitting my professional stride and feeling confident about my career trajectory, life delivered a devastating blow that would fundamentally reshape my understanding of what truly mattered in the grand scheme of human existence. My father, who had always seemed invincible despite decades of physically demanding construction work that had weathered his body like desert wind carving patterns in sandstone, was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer that had already begun spreading to nearby lymph nodes. The oncologist explained with clinical precision that years of exposure to construction dust, asbestos fibers, and industrial chemicals had created the perfect conditions for malignant cells to develop and multiply, while my father's habit of smoking during his younger years had accelerated the destructive process. The prognosis was uncertain at best, with treatment options that offered hope but no guarantees, and suddenly all my professional achievements felt meaningless compared to the possibility of losing the man who had taught me everything about perseverance, integrity, and the value of hard work. The diagnosis forced our entire family to confront mortality in ways we had never imagined, transforming our daily concerns from routine worries about work and money to existential fears about time, legacy, and the fragility of human life. The months that followed tested our family's resilience in ways we could never have imagined during our earlier struggles with unemployment and financial insecurity. I used all my accumulated vacation time, sick days, and personal leave to help care for my father during his intensive treatments, driving back and forth between Phoenix and the Specialized Cancer Center in Tucson, where he received chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and experimental treatments that offered hope but came with severe side effects. Watching this strong man who had carried our family through every previous crisis gradually become weak, nauseated, and dependent on others for basic daily activities broke something fundamental inside me while simultaneously revealing reserves of inner strength I didn't know I possessed. I learned to advocate fiercely for his medical needs when healthcare providers seemed rushed or inattentive, coordinate complex treatment schedules that involved multiple specialists, and provide emotional support for my mother and Jake while managing my own overwhelming fears and grief. The experience taught me that love isn't just an emotion, but an active choice to show up consistently for people who matter, even when circumstances become difficult and frightening. During one of my father's extended hospital stays, I met David, a compassionate social worker who specialized in helping families navigate the complex emotional, financial, and logistical challenges that accompany serious medical crises. He possessed a rare combination of professional competence and genuine empathy that made even the most difficult conversations feel manageable and hopeful. Our relationship began strictly as a professional interaction. He would check regularly on our family's emotional well-being, provide resources for coping with my father's illness, and help us understand insurance benefits and treatment options that seemed overwhelmingly complex. Gradually, as we worked together to support my family through this crisis, our professional interactions evolved into personal conversations about life, loss, dreams, and the ways people find meaning in suffering. Unlike my previous relationships that had been built on shared interests, physical attraction, or convenient timing, this connection grew from a foundation of witnessing each other handle real-world challenges with grace, compassion, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right regardless of personal cost. My father's courageous battle lasted 18 months, during which he demonstrated remarkable strength, maintained his characteristic sense of humor, even during the most difficult treatments, and used his illness as an opportunity to share accumulated wisdom with Jake and me about life, relationships, and what really matters when everything else falls away. He spoke openly about his regrets, times when work had taken priority over family gatherings, opportunities for deeper conversations that he had postponed indefinitely, and dreams he had abandoned too quickly when obstacles appeared. But he also shared his proudest moments, watching his children graduate from school, building a home with his own hands, maintaining a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, and creating a family legacy of hard work, integrity, and love that would outlast any material achievements. These profound conversations were emotionally painful but spiritually precious, giving us the kind of closure and understanding that many families never experience because they avoid difficult topics or assume there will always be time for important discussions later. When my father finally passed peacefully at home on a quiet Tuesday morning, surrounded by loved ones and free from the pain that had dominated his final months, I felt simultaneously devastated by the loss and profoundly grateful for the time we had been given to prepare for his death and say goodbye properly. The grief that followed was unlike anything I had experienced before, a physical ache that seemed to have taken permanent residence in my chest, making simple activities like breathing feel like conscious effort rather than automatic bodily function. Work became a welcome distraction from the intensity of mourning, and my colleagues were extraordinarily understanding about my need for flexible scheduling and emotional support during this difficult period. The marketing firm allowed me to work remotely when needed, reduced my client load temporarily, and provided access to grief counseling services that helped me begin processing the complex emotions that accompany losing a parent while still relatively young. David's support during these dark months deepened our relationship in ways that neither of us had anticipated when we first met in the hospital corridors. He didn't try to fix my pain with platitudes or rush me through the natural mourning process that follows significant loss. Instead, he simply remained present as a steady, reliable source of comfort and understanding, while I learned to carry the weight of grief without being crushed by its intensity. His patience with my emotional volatility, understanding of the complicated feelings that accompany parental death, and willingness to provide support without expecting anything in return laid the foundation for a mature love that felt sustainable and nurturing rather than passionate but unstable. We spent countless hours talking about my father's impact on my life, processing the lessons he had taught through both words and example, and exploring how his death was changing my perspective on career ambitions, life priorities, and what constituted meaningful success. A year after my father's death, David and I made the decision to move in together, taking the next significant step in a relationship that had been forged through crisis, but had grown into something beautiful, stable, and mutually supportive. Our shared apartment became a sanctuary where we could both decompress from our demanding careers, his in social work and mine in marketing, while also creating new traditions and routines that honored our individual needs and our shared goals for building a life together. We established weekly rituals like cooking elaborate meals on Sunday afternoons, taking long walks through desert trails where we could talk without distractions, and setting aside time each evening to discuss our days without the interference of television, phones, or other technological distractions. For the first time since losing my father, I felt hopeful about the future and excited about building something lasting with someone who understood both my strengths and my vulnerabilities in ways that previous partners never had. The process of blending our lives together involved practical considerations like combining households, managing finances as a partnership, and making joint decisions about everything from furniture purchases to vacation destinations. But it also required deeper emotional work around trust, communication, and shared vision for our future. David's background in social work had taught him valuable skills about conflict resolution, active listening, and creating safe spaces for difficult conversations, while my experiences in marketing had developed my abilities in strategic planning, goal setting, and problem solving under pressure. These complementary skill sets served us well as we navigated the normal challenges of cohabitation, while also supporting each other through ongoing grief, career pressures, and the various life transitions that define one's late 20s. We learned to balance independence with interdependence, maintaining our individual identities and interests while also building shared experiences and mutual support systems. Our relationship was tested periodically by external stresses like demanding work projects, family obligations, and financial pressures, but each challenge we successfully navigated together strengthened our confidence in our partnership and deepened our commitment to supporting each other through whatever difficulties might arise in the future. David's steady presence helped heal some of the emotional wounds left by my father's death, while my resilience and determination inspired him to pursue advanced training in his field that would expand his ability to help other families facing medical crises. We began talking seriously about marriage, children, and the kind of legacy we wanted to build together, conversations that felt mature and grounded rather than driven by romantic fantasy or social expectations. The life we were creating felt authentic, sustainable, and aligned with both our individual values and our shared vision for contributing positively to the world around us. By my 27th birthday, I felt like I had successfully navigated the major challenges of early adulthood and established a solid foundation for the decades ahead. My career was thriving with increasing responsibilities and recognition. My relationship with David provided emotional stability and genuine partnership, and my family relationships had deepened through the shared experience of losing my father and learning to support each other through grief. Jake was excelling in college and had developed into a thoughtful young man who sought my advice about everything from academic choices to relationship decisions, while my mother had found ways to create meaning and joy in her life as a widow while maintaining the strong family connections that had always been central to our cultural identity. The future seemed full of possibilities, and I felt equipped to handle whatever challenges might arise based on everything I had already overcome and learned. Little did I know that life was preparing to test me in ways that would make everything I had faced together seem manageable by comparison, and that all the strength, love, and resilience I had developed would soon be called upon in ways I could never have imagined. 8 months have passed since that terrifying day when I collapsed during my presentation, and I'm writing this final chapter from my home office, surrounded by the familiar comforts that once seemed so ordinary but now feel precious beyond measure. The morning sun streams through windows that David installed new blinds on last month, casting warm patterns across the desk where my laptop sits open, cursor blinking patiently as I search for words adequate to capture this journey from the brink of despair to cautious hope. The treatment for Susac syndrome has been more grueling than anything I experienced watching my father battle cancer. High-dose steroids that made my face swell and my emotions swing wildly, immunosuppressive medications that left me vulnerable to every passing illness, and countless medical appointments that transformed my life from predictable routine to constant uncertainty. Some days I feel almost like my former self, energetic and optimistic about the future, while others leave me exhausted by the simple effort of getting dressed and making breakfast. But I am alive, breathing without mechanical assistance, thinking clearly enough to tell the story, and that simple fact has completely transformed my understanding of what constitutes victory in the battle we call life. The hearing loss in my left ear has become permanent, a constant reminder of how quickly and completely life can change direction without warning or preparation. I've learned to compensate by turning my right ear toward conversations, asking people to repeat themselves when necessary without embarrassment, and sitting in specific positions during meetings to maximize my ability to participate effectively. The silence on my left side initially felt like a disability, but I've gradually learned to think of it as a different way of experiencing the world that has made me more intentional about listening and more appreciative of the sounds I can still perceive clearly. My vision, which was severely affected during the acute phase of my illness when I couldn't read street signs or recognize faces from more than a few feet away, has largely returned to normal function, though I still experience occasional episodes of blurred sight that serve as humbling reminders of my vulnerability. These visual disturbances usually last only a few minutes, but they're enough to interrupt whatever I'm doing and force me to pause, breathe deeply, and remember that my health remains fragile despite the remarkable progress I've made. The cognitive symptoms that once terrified me more than any physical disability, the confusion that made me forget familiar words, the memory problems that left me unable to recall conversations from the previous day, the mental fog that made complex thinking feel impossible, have improved significantly with treatment, allowing me to return to work on a modified schedule that accommodates my ongoing recovery needs. My supervisor, Ms. Chen, worked with human resources to create a flexible arrangement where I handle strategic planning and client communications from home several days per week, coming into the office only for essential meetings and collaborative projects that require face-to-face interaction. This arrangement has actually improved my productivity and job satisfaction by eliminating the stress of commuting and the pressure to appear completely normal during the times when my symptoms flare unexpectedly. My colleagues have been remarkably supportive, covering for me when I need unexpected time off and celebrating small victories like completing my first major campaign post-diagnosis with genuine enthusiasm rather than pity or condescension. David has been my anchor throughout this entire journey, proving that the love we built during my father's illness was strong enough to weather an even more serious storm that threatened not just our plans but my very survival. He learned to give me injections when my hands were too shaky to manage the precise movements required, celebrated seemingly minor victories like walking around the block without assistance as if they were major triumphs, and never once made me feel like a burden despite the ways my illness transformed our daily life and future plans. His unwavering support taught me that true partnership means showing up consistently for each other, not just during the easy times when love feels effortless, but especially when circumstances become unpredictable and frightening, and the person you love becomes someone you barely recognize due to medication side effects and physical limitations. We've had to adjust our expectations about everything from weekend activities to long-term goals. But these adaptations have ultimately strengthened our relationship by teaching us to focus on what really matters rather than superficial concerns about appearance, productivity, or social expectations. My relationship with Jake has deepened in unexpected ways as he stepped up to help our family navigate this latest crisis with maturity and compassion that surprised everyone who knew him as a sometimes self-centered college student. The young man who once seemed more interested in fraternity parties and video games than family obligations has become someone who calls me every week to check on my progress, sends thoughtful text messages when he knows I have medical appointments, and shares updates about his studies and social life in ways that keep me connected to normal life beyond illness and treatment. He's planning to study medicine, inspired partly by watching our father's courageous battle with cancer, and partly by witnessing my journey with this rare neurological condition that most people have never heard of. Our family's repeated experiences with serious illness have taught all of us that healing involves not just medical treatment and pharmaceutical intervention, but also the love, support, and practical assistance we provide for each other during times when individual strength isn't sufficient to overcome the challenges we face. My career has evolved in ways I never could have anticipated to accommodate both my new limitations and the shift in priorities that accompanies surviving a life-threatening illness. The marketing firm has been incredibly supportive throughout my treatment, allowing me to work remotely when needed, adjusting deadlines to accommodate medical appointments, and providing disability benefits that covered my expenses during the months when I was too sick to work effectively. More importantly, I've discovered a passionate interest in healthcare marketing, using my personal experience as a patient to help medical organizations communicate more effectively with people facing serious diagnoses and their families who often feel overwhelmed by complex treatment options and medical terminology. This work feels meaningful in ways that my previous campaigns for restaurants and retail stores never did, connecting my professional skills with a deeper sense of purpose that emerged from my own journey through the healthcare system as someone fighting for survival, rather than simply providing services. The greatest lesson this experience has taught me is that life's true value isn't measured in years accumulated or achievements collected, but in the depth of our connections with other people and the positive impact we have on their lives during whatever time we're given. Every morning I wake up feels like receiving an unexpected gift that shouldn't be taken for granted or wasted on trivial concerns about productivity, appearance, or social status. Every meaningful conversation with loved ones has become precious in ways I never recognized when I assumed we would have unlimited opportunities to connect and communicate in the future. Every small accomplishment, from preparing a meal without assistance to completing a work project that meets my own standards, feels significant and worthy of celebration, rather than just another step toward larger goals that may or may not be achievable given the uncertainty of my medical condition. I don't know what the future holds, whether my neurological symptoms will remain stable at current levels, improve further through continued treatment, or deteriorate despite the best medical care available. The uncertainty that once paralyzed me with fear has become something I've learned to accept as a fundamental condition of human existence that applies to everyone regardless of their current health status. We are all living with unknowns about how much time we have, what challenges we'll face, and whether our plans and dreams will unfold as we hope they will. The only response that makes sense is to love as deeply as possible, live as authentically as we can manage, and never take a single moment for granted because none of us knows when our circumstances might change dramatically and permanently. This isn't the story I planned to write when I was a young woman dreaming about career success and personal fulfillment, but it has become the most important and transformative chapter of my life. The physical scars from multiple foreign insertions and medical procedures will fade eventually, but the emotional and spiritual growth that emerged from this crisis will remain with me for whatever time I have remaining on this earth. I've learned to find peace in uncertainty, to embrace each day fully without needing guarantees about tomorrow's possibilities, and to measure success not in external achievements but in internal growth and meaningful relationships. My rare disease taught me that we are all vulnerable in ways we prefer not to acknowledge, and that the only rational response to this vulnerability is to create as much love, beauty, and positive impact as possible while we have the opportunity and ability to do so. The support I've received from family, friends, colleagues, and even strangers who learned about my story has restored my faith in human goodness and the power of community to sustain people through their darkest moments. Cards from former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, meal deliveries from neighbors I barely knew, and prayers from my mother's church congregation reminded me that we're all connected in ways that transcend superficial differences, and that compassion is one of the most powerful forces available for healing both individual suffering and collective wounds. This experience has taught me to be more generous with my own support for others facing difficulties, more patient with people who are struggling with challenges I might not understand, and more grateful for the ordinary blessings that surround us constantly, but often go unnoticed until they're threatened or lost. As I finish writing this account of my journey from a promising young professional to a patient fighting for survival, and back towards something resembling normal life, I'm filled with gratitude rather than bitterness, hope rather than despair, and determination rather than defeat. The woman who collapsed during a business presentation 8 months ago was accomplished and ambitious, but she was also somewhat superficial in her understanding of what really matters in a life well lived. The woman writing these words has been humbled by illness, strengthened by struggle, and transformed by the love of people who showed up when showing up was difficult and costly. I may never fully recover the hearing I've lost, the career momentum that was interrupted, or the naive confidence I once had about controlling my future through hard work and careful planning. But I've gained something more valuable, a deep appreciation for the miraculous nature of ordinary existence and the profound privilege of sharing this brief time on Earth with other people who are also doing their best to love well, live authentically, and create meaning from whatever circumstances they've been given to work with in their own stories.